Okay, here goes with the next video lesson on W.B. Yeats on his poem Death. Sorry if you hear some weird noises in the background, somebody is drilling the house to bits downstairs. Death. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. Many times he died, many times he rose again. A great man in his pride confronting murderous men casts derision upon supersession of breath. He knows death to the bone. Man has created death. You'll see now that I have split the poem into 6 bits. The first one is very obvious, circling the title, which is not the or a or somebody in particular's death. It is a meditation on the abstract idea of death. Nevertheless, we have no idea who the speaker is, why they particularly want to talk about death, what their attitude to it is, until we have got through the whole poem. So, moving on, section 2. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. It sounds bizarrely as if it is perhaps actually in the middle of a sentence, beginning in the middle of a thought. It's almost as if there's some idea here that everybody meditates on death, everybody spends their time thinking about it, and in a sense, while we live our lives, we are in the middle of waiting for it to happen. But you'll notice, I'm sure, that it begins, nor dread nor hope attend, by which he means wait, a dying animal. So although we begin with human ideas of dreading things, not just fear, dread has a particular intellectual quality to it, or a particular build-up of fear, and hope, which requires the concept of the future, the concept of luck, perhaps the concept of all sorts of human ideas, and a certain sort of vulnerability. So these two very human ideas, nor dread nor hope, attend, this complex word that he's chosen to use for waiting. Neither of these things apparently wait, although he makes us wait at the end of the line. You'll see I'm about to mark the enjambment sign as he moves over into the second line. Neither of these very human things, dread or hope, wait upon a dying animal. And at the end of the line we see the placement of the word animal, and we discover that in the first 2 lines of the poem he chooses not to talk about men or women or people or human beings, he's talking about animals. And lots of you will leap up, I'm sure, and say, yes, but surely we could talk about human beings as if they are animals. And we can, but we should be aware of the fact that Yeats is always interested in oppositions and he's always interested in categories. So we discover that in this poem, which is a lyrical meditation about death, he says that what is it that distinguishes human beings from death? Well, us poor human beings have a nasty habit of dreading and hoping and knowing that we are mortal, knowing that we will die, and worrying about that fact, whereas animals have the luxury of not actually realising what it means to die, or this is at least what the poet alleges. So the clever construction of this poem fronts up the problem we're going to deal with, death. Then it fronts up the idea of a person trying to decide what to care about, and we know this because of the nor. This starts also with a kind of regretful tone and a sense of difficulty or struggle, which you'll remember that we also encountered in An Irish Airman Foresees His Death. We get the idea of categorising things using this Latinate wording attend, and then we discover in the first 2 lines completely enjambed over, nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. It's almost a kind of falling cadence that encapsulates all of the regret that this speaker feels about the horribleness of worrying about death. The semicolon we can comment on, of course, because actually this kind of punctuation was placed in by Yeats in earlier poetry from the Renaissance, which we're going to study next year. We can't comment on punctuation because most of it belongs to the editor, but here we can. So this semicolon here we know is splitting out one clause from another. We also know that it may in fact be showing a kind of seesaw moment, a kind of moment of poise or balance. And I'm picking up again on the ideas that we found in The Irish Airman, in which we were talking about how Yeats seems to be becoming obsessed with the idea of what it is that human beings need to balance up in their lives. We know from his philosophical writings in The Vision, which I've given you links to on Edmodo, that he's concerned about oppositions and he's concerned about historical cycles which take human beings in and out of certain kinds of balance between certain kinds of forces in their lives. So that's an awful lot to claim for a semicolon, but nevertheless what we've got is the first section here, section 2, drawing our attention to how animals live and experience life when it comes to the idea of death. And we see very swiftly after the semicolon that the next section is going to focus on human beings or man. So it now goes, nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. And we get a kind of inversion here where we get the link between animal and a man, which actually almost has a sort of sound resemblance inside it. A man being not that far away from animal, a man. So perhaps we might find that Yeats is making some kind of link here, some kind of suggestion that ironically we are actually not much more than animals, but what is it that makes us more than animals? This nasty habit that we have of thinking and wondering. A man awaits, and that open vowel sound of await is a very similar open vowel sound to attend, except it's more open in the 8 section. A man awaits his what? What does he await? He awaits his end, apparently, but of course we have another ironic enjambment where Yeats cleverly enjambs, runs over onto the next line, awaits his end, and we think, well, jolly good, so what? That's the way life is, and seems quite suitable to put end on the end of a line. Awaits his end, and then followed by 2 participles, dreading and hoping all. It's not even as if the abstract concept of dread or hope wait for us. It's much worse than that. We are stuck in a cycle of feeling dread, feeling hope, and we've got this wonderful openness at the end of the line, all. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. Now that could mean, although we're not sure because of this odd kind of elision, hoping for all, about all, or all of the time. And Yeats leaves it open so we can be having the effect of all of those things. It's almost as if every single bit of man's life, when he comes towards the end of it, is encompassed by this nasty little sandwich, this nasty little vicious catch of being caught between the ultimate wish for a lucky, good outcome or dread, which is that extreme kind of fear of something extremely unpleasant happening. So we have the balance of first 4 lines, long first one, long fourth one, 2 short ones in the middle, which go, nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal, a man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. They don't particularly sound as 4 lines as if they rhyme, but we have these internal sound patterns building up through the repetitions of dread and dreading, hope and hoping, and also the animal, a man awaits, those horrible, nasty, uncertain, open A sounds. Moving on into section 4, we then discover, because of the repetition of the he and the he, that we are going to keep on with our focus on human beings and on man, as Yeats chooses to designate it. We see that he's going to use his rhetorical style of repetition through the many times and many times, which we also experienced in the middle of the Irish Airman, with the Kiltartan's cross and Kiltartan's poor, and the nor and neithers. So this is a very rhetorical poem, which we might imagine might therefore have some kind of political resonance, or at the very least it has a formal quality. So the meditation on death appears to be having a kind of persuasive effect on us. We are not supposed to just listen to this voice as if it is an old man thinking about dying. We're supposed to think about it as somebody making a declarative statement about the way life is. Many times man died, many times he rose again. However, if I say it that way, we begin to wonder who this he is. Many times he died and many times he rose again doesn't even fit with the Christian idea, because of course we have Christ who only died once and only rose once. But it does certainly have the idea of some sort of miraculous resurrection, the idea perhaps of somebody coming to bring us salvation sitting behind it in the poem. Who could this person be? Well, as you'll see, there's absolutely no indication of any name or place or even job. But we do discover in the next line, which is the beginning of section 5, a great man in his pride. A great man, it seems to suggest any particular great man may have this attitude to life, but we know actually that we're talking here about Kevin Halligan. No, hang on a minute, I'm not getting that right, that's a different poet. I'm not going to stop in the middle here and get you the name, but it's a particular political associate of Yeats's who died in the middle of the nationalist uprisings, of which W. Yeats was interested in. So this particular person who we've been told he was interested in, by many times he died, it's thought that he didn't physically die, and obviously didn't actually rise again, but he had many failures. So this is a poem about how in our life we can experience death as one physical ending, the ultimate physical ending, and spiritual, if you're that way inclined, ending, but we experience lots of little deaths as we go along. So every time we have a little failure or a little inability to proceed with our political ideas or our personal gains or goals, then perhaps arguably that is described as a death. But what makes a man great, what makes a person great, perhaps it's that when these little deaths occur, we get back up on our feet. So we only know that it has to be read that way by reading through the rest of the poem, because if we took the first 6 lines, it would go, "Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. A man awaits his hen, dreading and hoping all. Many times he died, many times he rose again." That would leave us feeling, those first 6 lines, as if man's life has a random quality. We can never quite tell when we're going to be able to understand something fully or not. It's as if a person would simply be trusting as to whether the death or the little disappointment or difficulty, or even great disappointment or difficulty in life, the lack of achievement, is something where perhaps there is reason to hope again for more, hope for more luck another time. But by the end of section 4, the first 6 lines, really it feels very much on a seesaw, very much on a balance. It could go either way, and it doesn't sound like an attractive life. I don't particularly want to live my life thinking that every time I experience a little failure, well, maybe it'll be worse next time, or maybe it'll be better. However, we should pay attention again to the punctuation and see that Yeats gives us a very firm full stop at the end there. That is the end of a full sentence. This is what man in general does. Man in general hopes, dreads, is only a little better than a dying animal, and the only way in which he's better than a dying animal, or more capable, is that he has this ability to fear, this ability to wonder, this ability to look into the future and know that things could get better or worse. He has foresight, but not any greater power than that. However, this is bang halfway through the poem, because after this we get 6 more lines. So if I use this red colour to show this here, I'm going to pick a new colour, here we go. So we can see now that we are halfway through the poem, and Yeats switches his focus to the idea not just the common man, any old random man who's only a little bit better than an animal, but we now talk about great men. And we know that Yeats admired the idea of power, but not force. He idolised people who were capable of persuasion, capable of making a difference. He liked those who rose up, he liked those who fought in respect of independence for Ireland, but he did not necessarily idolise people who were forceful solely for the sake of it. So we're going to explore a little bit what he thinks a great man here is. A great man in his pride confronting murderous men casts derision upon supersession of breath. So from these 2 lines we see that a great man is supposed to be proud. He's also supposed to confront difficulties, and the difficulty he's envisaged confronting here are murderous men, i.e. people with intent to cause greater trouble or difficulty, people who indeed aim to cause death. So the interesting thing here is that Yeats seems to be presenting us with an idea that if you want to be anything other than a common man, you need to value life. Why else would you confront murderous men if not to prevent them from murdering more? Yet this great man, who experiences the pride, the power, the sense of self, enabling him to actually butt in and confront people who are otherwise capable of causing death, the great man in his pride confronting murderous men, what does this man do? Well, in this entirely enjambed section, you'll see that all 4 of these lines, or all 3 leading up to the last one, enjambe, the great man is hard P, plosive, proud. He hard C, confronts, and then with the stress on murderous men, suggesting a kind of aggression and certainty all at the same time. A great man in his pride confronting murderous men, what does he do? He casts derision upon supersession of breath. Now, supersession here means letting go of or having your last breath, giving up. And by derision, we might think you wouldn't like to call a great man somebody who derides things, but what this great man laughs at is the idea of not having enough breath. And breath, of course, reminds us again of the previous poem, An Irish Airman, in which we had our focus directed to the idea of a waste of breath in the past and a waste of breath in the future. It would seem, putting these two poems together, that Yeats admires this kind of political great man just as much as he admired the airman. When doing something worthwhile, in the airman poem, living in a tumult, living in the moment, in this poem, confronting murderous men and making the most of your pride and capacity, these are both more worthwhile than the simply animal act of breathing. Man can think and live well more than he can just breathe. So, first 6 lines, what does the common man do? He fears death, but he also merely hopes that more may happen. Second 4 lines, what does a great man do? The great man has some kind of idea, some kind of sense of his own capacity to act. He will confront, he will take action. He is proud of his ability to take action. He casts using that wonderful verb, which sounds careless but also sounds like fishing, sounds like throwing, sounds like casting the dice. Either way, it's a combination of luck and action. Someone who takes part and trusts that action will work out well for him, who is able to laugh at minor problems like not being able to breathe enough. I say that ironically. This is what a great man does. And then we are given another semicolon showing us that this is the end of a clause and coming to what might be summing up the end of the poem. And very interestingly at this point, what we get structurally in terms of the summing up at the end of the poem is a kind of couplet. We get a 2-line section here, which has a hyphen at one end and is bounded at the end by the full stop. So we're going to get a kind of half statement and then a full statement rounding up the poem. And here's what we're told the great man does. He knows death to the bone. Man has created death. So, again we have the I know from the Irish Airman. Here we have the he knows. What is it that the great man knows? Death. He knows death. And rather like before, where we had the hoping for all, which left out the for, the about, or the all, here we have knows death, which is an incredibly short, compressed phrase. And we must ask, knows means understand? Or does it mean familiar with? Does it mean instinctually knows? Does it mean educatedly knows? Does it mean has found out and comprehends? I think it means all these things, and I think that there's a real kind of sense of life experience here, because he knows death to the bone, which is of course a colloquial expression, but brings up the idea of dead bodies, brings up the idea of decay, but brings up the idea perhaps of almost like an X-ray, being able to look through something right to the very heart of it, right down to the hard, bitter fragileness of it. Bone is an incredibly clever metaphor for Yeats to have chosen here for death, because it's both the ultimate thing to which we are ground down to, even if you cremate a body, but it's also the strong thing that holds us all up. We talk about having a backbone, we talk about standing up straight and being true to your core, but we also talk about the fragility of bones, and people do worry about breaking bones. So he knows death to the bone. The great man in Yeats's idea knows that death is both final and also a symbol of man's fragility. But this little hyphen that I've almost got rid of there for you, I'll just put it back in, leads us to almost like an equal sign, the great man's knowledge, which means that he is not stuck with having to feel like a dying animal. The great man does not have to be stuck without any kind of foreknowledge, nor does he have to be stuck like the average man who is left to simply hope or dread. He understands a far more terrible thing, that in actual fact it is man, fronted up at the beginning of the line there, putting the emphasis on it, who has made death. And there's an irony there in the comparison of these two words. Create death. It's almost an oxymoronic juxtaposition. Death is the situation in which everything is annihilated, but it is in fact man that has made death. And at this moment we have to ask, in what sense could we say that man has created death? Because it's not the case that when you're born you decide to clock up how you're going to die or when. But if we talk about death as meaning some kind of war or some kind of conflict or some kind of political death or a necessity for death, the way that man uses death to force his own ends, that is something that we could say that man has created. It's interesting, though, in opposition to the animal again, because you might say that survival dictates that animals kill each other or thin populations out, but what man seems to do is to do this for political reasons. And I think that the comparison shows Yeats is suggesting that any political action which actually causes death is something that is regrettable and unfortunate and perhaps even unnatural. It is something that man has actually cultured or made part of the business of being a human being, the knowledge that we are capable of causing death, and historically speaking, the knowledge that we do, as groups of people, cyclically cause large amounts of death. And at this point, I would draw your attention to the article which I posted on Edmodo, talking about the historical cycles which Yeats felt that he had discovered and been able to illustrate across centuries, illustrating how man tends to either make things, creating positive forces, or destroy things. And I think reflecting on those historical cycles in combination with this poem is a fruitful thing to do. Okay, so having confused the two poets, of course, the political friend in favour of whom this poem was written was actually Kevin O'Higgins. And you'll see here also that this was a eulogy written on the moment of the assassination of his friend. Kevin O'Higgins apparently said to his wife that after he had been responsible for causing the conviction and therefore the death of several IRA members who'd carried out murders, that, as he said to his wife, he couldn't expect to live after what he had done, which is explicit acknowledgement of the danger of involving yourself in politics where you're dealing with murderous men, to take the quotation from Death, who feel capable of and feel comfortable about causing further death. I think it's fascinating that this poem came from his selection of poetry called The Winding Stair, and you'll remember that we've talked before about the gyre, which was this kind of spiral opening out, beginning at the bottom, cone-shaped movement, which goes like this. The idea of a winding stair suggests to us the idea of a tower or something in which it is necessary to have a stair to get to the top. So at this period of time, when Yeats was writing these poems, he was thinking about systems, he was thinking about how actions build on other actions, he was thinking about how people seek to rise to the top of movements, and he was thinking about the consequences of these things. So I'll just read the poem to you again, and this time I'll try to read it for the music of the poem more. Death. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. Many times he died, many times he rose again. A great man in his pride, confronting murderous men, casts derision upon supersession of breath. He knows death to the bone. Man has created death. And this time I feel like there is a kind of sadness in the poem. The nor, hope, or all O sounds, nor dread nor hope, has a falling cadence of sadness. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal with a dying cadence. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. Many times he died, many times he rose again. The chanting sense that we get here and here. Many times he died, many times he rose again. A great man in his pride, confronting murderous men, casts derision upon supersession of breath. He knows death to the bone. Man has created death. There are places in this poem where the rhythm is inverted, and I'll try to show them to you now, so you can feel the sadness, but also the frustration, and also the sense of unfortunate certainty which Yeats brings to his revelation here, his epiphany that he is having about death. Death. That one monosyllable. Death. A nasty sense of certainty. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. Peculiarly, a kettle was just used in the house and made a dreadful noise, so I'm going to start again. Death. Nor dread nor hope attend a dying animal. A man awaits his end, dreading and hoping all. Many times he died, many times he rose again, a great man in his pride, confronting murderous men, casts derision upon supersession of breath. He knows death to the bone. Man has created death. So I think the main places are, he knows death to the bone, because you couldn't say he knows death to the bone. Well, you could, but it would be weird. He knows death to the bone. This word here has an inverted rhythm and it sort of pulls out a pause from you. Man has created death, you could say, but man has created death. You want there to be a kind of pull on this word here. So, mainly this poem operates on enjambment, here, 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 and here. It operates on a few beautifully kind of split out lines, like the title, Death. He knows death to the bone, and man has created death. And it has a wonderful kind of set of quotations almost. A great man in his pride is a sort of quotable thing you want to be able to say in speeches. Casting derision has got a sort of nasty snide feeling to it, and supersession of breath has that kind of airy breathlessness to it that mirrors the action of perhaps feeling a last breath going out. So I think some of these are the patterns that we feel through this poem, and you no doubt will find many more. I would pause now and take some time to annotate it while speaking the poem several times out loud.